And now the speaker that I recognize, please identify yourself.
Oh, thank you. Mandi Jo Hanneke, Precinct 5. Mr. Moderator, may I have an extra minute due to having to address the Weiss amendment too?
Yes. All those in favor of granting an extra minute to Ms. Hanneke, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You may proceed. 4 minutes.
Thank you. First, full disclosure, as I said, I'm Mandi Jo Hanneke from Precinct 5. I was Vice Chair of the Charter Commission, but I'm not speaking tonight on behalf of the Charter Commission. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I thought town meeting members would benefit from hearing how the Charter Commission reached consensus on the September and November election dates proposed in the motion made tonight by the Select Board. On June 22nd, 2017, the Charter Commission discussed an initial transition schedule proposed by our transition working group. Yes, I went back and watched that video, and it took a while to have that discussion. That schedule would have had 15 months and 2 annual town meetings between the adoption of the charter and the seating of the town council. The Commission reached consensus that this proposed schedule would drag out the transition too long. Should the charter be adopted, it seemed unfair to the residents of Amherst and to the functioning of the town to keep things in limbo for 15 months. So we began discussing alternatives. We were constrained by the state elections being held this September and November. Any local elections scheduled within 30 days of either of these elections would need a special act from the state legislature. So any local election between August and December 6th required a special act. But elections at other times also had their problems. Holding elections in Amherst while colleges are out of session was unacceptable. In fact, fellow Commissioner Nick Grabe was emphatic that we could not and should not do it, as there had been lawsuits surrounding such timing. So elections between mid-May and late August were out. We also wanted to ensure that the budget process for next year was not compromised. Doing so required seating the town council no later than mid-February, which is still a compressed budget process. But if we placed the general election in late January, the entire general election campaign would be during the winter break and the holidays, and the preliminary campaign would be in early December. None of this was very attractive. The schedule proposed by Mr. Weiss presents problems too with the budgeting, because under the charter, if the special act is adopted, with the November election, the council would be seated December 3rd. But with Mr. Weiss's amendment, the council could not be seated December 3rd because the election would not happen until December 4th, which means the council would fall back to a seating on February 4th. Again, a timeline that compresses the budget process under the new charter, and that is not ideal or very attractive at all. So the Commission reached consensus that holding the election of the town council on the same dates as the state elections was our best option, even though it required seeking the special act. It gave us the highest turnout we could hope for in a town council election during the transition period, and it did not require voters to go to the polls 4 times in 13 weeks, as setting the elections at the time that Mr. Weiss has proposed and moved does. The special act schedule is pragmatic and sensible, the one that's proposed by the Select Board. It puts the council in place with enough time to adequately and ably consider the budget under the timeline set forth in the charter. It doesn't unduly delay the transition to a new form of government, as later dates for council elections, including those Mr. Weiss has proposed, does. And it puts the main part of the campaign at a time in the calendar that doesn't interfere with the holidays or breaks, including Thanksgiving holiday. Further, choosing now to hold the election on any date other than September 4th and November 6th is an active choice to reduce turnout for the first town council election and burden Amherst's residents with going to the polls 4 times in 13 weeks. Please vote in favor of the special act as moved by the Select Board and against Mr. Weiss's amendment to that special act. As my fellow Charter Commissioner Julia Ruschemeyer stated at that June 22nd meeting where we set those original dates, we all seem to be basically in agreement. Thank you.